Welcome to First Thursday in October. At least for those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere, it makes sense to celebrate creation at the onset of the fall. Long ago, Jews made it their custom to begin the reading of the Pentateuch in the fall, beginning, of course, with the creation story, the opening book of Genesis. During my time as a parish priest, I unilaterally declared for my parish that the first Sunday of October was Creation Sunday. More recently, I noticed that there are a number of movements in the church, including the Episcopal Church, that designate September 1 to October 4, the season of creation. This seems to be largely driven by the recognition of just how much damage one particular species has done to the creation. And that's well and good. But to my mind, it would be better to focus on an attempt to imagine and celebrate God as the active creator of the reality of which we are a part. It would be a refreshment for our souls, and it would also give us a better foundation for evaluating and reversing the degradation of which we are responsible. In On Giving My Word, I attempted to provide a framework for such an effort in the chapter, Fragments on the Natural Narrative, beginning with an aphorism, paragraph 11, the universe and the narrative. The universe is the subject of a narrative, not simply the object of one. Discussion of the biblical account of creation is focused largely on the first three words of the text, which are translated as "in the beginning," or on those verbal acts such as the commandments in the pattern of "let there be light." The most important text to my mind for understanding this account, however, is "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth." It has been largely passed over with a smile as if it was some kind of simplistic gloss. The book of Genesis is in many ways a genealogy which is making the point that the story of the generations is our story as well, making us children of Adam, children of Eve, Abraham, and Sarah. This verse insists that the coming into being of the heavens and the earth is a story, and that its story is our story as well. Strangely, scientists are commonly thought of, as well as sometimes think, that they are undoing the creation story. But unconsciously or consciously, they are in fact doing it. The crucial issue of a creation story account is not the how, but it is the relationship that exists between the it and the us. There are two things in this aphorism for us to note. The first takeaway is that the universe is a narrative. Long before the book of Genesis addressed the question of reality, attempts to surface that story flourished in 1,000 local variations. The first appeared to be in writing was the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation story. This well-known way of telling the story influenced the biblical story, which came later, but it did not initiate or define it. Science itself has participated in this story's formation, and when it declared its independence from theology, it continued to present reality as a story. The second takeaway is that we, as souls or minds, are related to reality like the member of an extended family. Mind must have been intended from the beginning. Materialistic versions of evolution inevitably end up with mind as an epiphenomena, In other words, an unintended consequence or an accident. This is pretty unscientific and strangely untheological. Reflecting on this, I would like to offer you a poem based on my own personal journey, which expresses faith in the collegial possibility of science and theology. As children, my brother and I were given rock collections and chemistry sets. Before we were given Bibles. With them, we quietly competed with each other, and together we marveled at summer's fireflies in the empty lot, at skippers who walked in the pellucid waters of a Vermont brook, and pondered if one might turn milkweed sap into rubber, and spin cottonwood down into silk. When we did receive our Bibles, we read them as part of the same continuing story that we had begun, with little sense of discontinuity between the sources, and have kept them in our own way well into our old age, continuing to serve that little church that gave them. This might seem to be a little bit more than a kind of a childish confidence, but it seems to have endured through the course of our lives. Theology, which is my specialty, has in that time become less given to defining reality in a way that sets it apart from the spiritual journey. That, as we have seen, is unbiblical. Science, which is his specialty, has in that time become less confident in defining reality, objectifying it, so that it is merely a resource for us to use. That we can see is unscientific. Still, the theological poetic, which explores the reality of a partnership with science, needs to be cautious, and vice versa. I've expressed this in an aphorism on paragraph 7, A Difficult Mistress. It's on page 19. Science is a difficult mistress for theology. Old science, which has been lingering on her deathbed for the past 50 years, presented theology with a universe of solid particles bound in an implacable order, which had existed long before humans appeared on the scene and would be there long after they disappeared, and not a little relieved by its passing. New science, who is at first blush both charming and eloquent, presents us with a universe of fields all dependent on a base field named Higgs, after a man who imagined it. If it were turned off, the universe would dissolve in a blink of an eye, or perhaps run backward and be turned inside out. With due caution, I will take up the venture of reimagining evolution in the context of the new science. My beginning is a short poem on giving my words, which I call cupping. Cupping is that subtle curve that rules all evolution, begins with a wafer of matter and a parcel of information. This formula reimagines the foundation level of reality in terms that are quite different from those of the science that persisted from the ancient times associated with Democritus the Greek and down to our own recent time. It imagined reality made up of atoms, spherical particles beyond division. That view was altered with the exploration of subatomic particles, but this did not alter sufficiently the account for or the relationship between matter and information. The poetic image I offer above is not a self-contained particle, but a wafer, the thinnest imaginable slice of matter, open to information. Originally, this information is incredibly small, a couple of bits, a here or there, an in and out, a top or bottom. From a scientific point of view, informed matter gives that pattern of evolution possibilities and plausibility, missing in the evolution driven by matter. From a theological point of view, it restores a sacramentalism without having to take recourse to the dark arts or to black magic. I follow this with a longer poem in On Giving My Word, titled The Journey of the Mind to the Ultimate Smallness and Back. It's on page 22. I'll limit my remarks to this poem to a kind of a brief look at the center point. The poem begins by one traveling down to ultimate smallness, which, by the way, is what the recently declared Nobel Prize winners in chemistry did in order to see blue and red dots. There, the claim can be made that time itself is so small that one is so very close to the beginning of everything. This is commonly referred to as the Big Bang. This name, while being used by scientists, is not scientific, but is a poetic metaphor, after all, and a bad one in my opinion. I prefer calling this simply the first event. At the first event, inaccurately styled as the Big Bang, that which is now so immensely huge was so immensely, incredibly pinched, so that nearly adjacent to time, just as we would find in a visit to the ultimate small. There, the dimension of time shrinks for those like ourselves who would visit it in a way that is like the experience that followed the first event. The return from the ultimate small in the second part of the poem traces the line that parallels the evolutionary line of reality down to the evolution of the human self. On the way, let me note an episode in that evolutionary history that appears as a poem in On Giving My Word, when the cup became a cell. On some golden pond, quieted and shaded from the sting of ultraviolet light rays? Or was it in the spewed mist, rich with minerals of some thermal vent, or in some conjoining of the two that a film of fatty acids clumped, balled, and then spread into a double layer, held long enough to fold and bend in the primal pattern of cupping until water was both within and without? Was this life or the edge of life? Whatever, by the earth was changed. I do not suppose, of course, that these fragments are capable of solving the problems of evolution and the relationship between mind and matter. But I should hope that they demonstrate the possibility of a poetic that would prove valuable for theology and science, and particularly for their ability to work together. That leaves us with much undone, though there are some further hints that we could find in the fragments of the natural narrative. But largely that task falls to you to work on that poetic, or at least to encourage it. And to that end, I close with a new poem of mine that reflects on the works entitled When Poets. The examples of poets that I've chosen are ones that I have found in the past inspirational, and all who have made a significant inroad into the reimagining of our reality. When the poet Wordsworth declared that nature was the anchor of his soul, he was quickly charged with blasphemy, not so much against an almighty God, but as against the purity of the idea. That charge overlooked the fact that nature has an unseen door which opens on a landscape that is not open to the eyesight, but which imagination can explore with insight. Through that door spreads a story outpour, giving rise to the realm of ideas, as through it Almighty God entered and became man. When the poet Coleridge saw sea snakes in the moonlight, he saw what he could not see in the sunlight. The frost that came at midnight wrote him a poem on the window of his Devon country home. His sins appear to have been a denier of the greatest good for the greatest number, and of eating opium off in the land of Kublai Khan, which overlooks that good is not a number, and that nature is not simply a calculation, but a continuing story. When the poet Seamus Heaney saw light in a raindrop on a December day in County Wicklow, despite the mutterings in his head of letdown and erosion, he said, "Each drop recalls the diamond absolute." His sin appears to have been politic, as in the time of troubles he was neither an informer nor an internee, merely a writer, which overlooks no one walks out of troubles, which does not have a story that gives others room as well to walk. When we meet again for First Thursday in November, I intend to honor veterans who have served our country. This is prompted by the proximity of November 11th, which is known as Veterans Day, but also as Armistice Day, marking the end of the Great War on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, hoping that we would never have a war again. We will look at a poem in On Giving My Word entitled Ultramaris, Beyond the Sea. Thank you.